What is going on, comic fans? Welcome to the Legion of Comics. I'm Mark, and it's officially Christmas season, and it's time to talk about the most Christmassy thing I can think of at the moment, which is the potential Superman Legacy release. We have the trailer coming this month, and it made me stop and pause and go look at some news, and I found the most recent, most interesting thing. We all have questions about the upcoming DCU. We all want answers. People are getting excited. DC's peaking right now, and I found some stuff from James Gunn that's very interesting, and we're going to dive into that and the potential Star Wars timeline that James Gunn is creating with DC Comics' new cinematic universe. Let's go. Huge shout out to Big Time Collectibles. Find them linked in the description below, as well as JustinComicx cleaning, pressure, and submission services, and my LCS, ABX Comics and Games. If you need a comic shop to create a pool list at, they can help you out. Check the links in the description for fantastic resources in this wonderful hobby. So let's get into it. James Gunn is no stranger to social media, and he's constantly posting stuff all the time, keeping people kind of just hanging at a thread. You know, it's like when you watch Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and they're riding the ant. They've got the stick out in front of the ant with a little piece of food, and it just keeps going after the food, but never quite gets it. That's how it seems when you follow James Gunn on social media. He's always putting out little pieces of food. We don't get the full big picture, but we get little stuff along the way. A few weeks ago, I did a video talking about the continuity of the DCU and what is canon. And recently, he's kind of given us the next little breadcrumb, and that's what the timeline is going to look like. Comparatively, we have other cinematic timelines that has existed. We've got the Terminator franchise. The timeline's a huge mess. The Terminator Zero helped to clean a lot of that up. But you have the Marvel Cinematic Universe is the most comparable. It's superheroes. It's part of the big two. And we've seen how that timeline works. We had Iron Man release. And then from that point forward, every movie entry was just the next timeline entry as well. It went very linear from start to finish, with Captain Marvel's standalone film being the exception to the rule that kind of went back in time to the 90s to explain Carol Danvers to everybody. Now, what James Gunn said specifically about his timeline is kind of a loaded statement. There's a lot to chew on here, and that's not the right one. It looks like this is the actual statement. It says, we're creating a universe that is like Star Wars, where there are different times, different places, different things, and like Game of Thrones, where characters are a little bit more morally complex. Not even diving into the morally complex part yet, but just stating that it's going to be more like Star Wars compared to the MCU. That made perfect sense to me. But I saw a couple of streams over the weekend where people were, I don't want to say complaining, they were acting like they don't understand that statement or acting confused by that statement when it seems pretty straightforward. Where you take the Marvel cinematic timeline and it's just linear. Here's the start point, here's the finish point, it's a straight line. You look at the Star Wars one, and from the beginning it starts with part 4. And then you cut back to the prequels. Then after that, we had a solo movie that was in there. We had Rogue One that takes place right between the original 3 and the new 3. We have the sequel trilogy that comes after. You literally do installments into this universe. You have a timeline, and you're not restricted by that always forward. Shout out to John's Comics with Kids, that advancing forward timeline. You can make a movie that takes place anywhere in your timeline. You can go back and do the Acolyte that takes place at the farthest point in the past that we've explored, or you can do like the sequel trilogy and keep pushing it forward in anywhere in between. This gives you more creative freedom and gives your projects more creative freedom, especially if you're looking to let the writers, the director, and the cast and crew attached to really bring these characters and their vision to the screen. Where Superman Legacy is really kicking it off, I'm sure there'll be plenty of movies that come right after it, but we know a Swamp Thing movie is coming, and do you want that Swamp Thing project burdened by this overwhelming continuity and this task of having to push the cinematic universe narrative forward? Or would you like a Swamp Thing movie that is unshackled by that and could potentially take place in like the early 90s or the 80s, where technology is less and you're really just diving into like the horror aspects and people having to survive on their wits and their merits versus having all this high technology and stuff? A lot of horror movies have that trope where, oh no, I don't have cell service and stuff like that, which gets corny as it gets and bogged down. There's numerous examples of tropes like that where technology has to have some kind of write-off, or you can just do a movie that takes place a little bit farther in the past, and you don't damage any of the continuity of the stuff that's established, but you work inside the parameters of your own film. It seems like it's a really way to set itself apart from the MCU while still being creative. One thing that's gotten tiresome with the MCU for a lot of people is the copy paste format of it, where it all looks like it's coming off the same clone assembly line. Having this ability brings more creative elements to these projects. You're not, again, like just thinking of the time era that you're setting it in, where Star Wars is a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away and stands on its own styles, themes, and everything. The DCU will have a lot of familiar stuff as it takes place on Earth. So by doing this, it allows for that artistic direction. We've seen some set photos from Superman, and it looks like it's hard to even place the specific time era that movie is going to take place in based off some of the costumes. He has that unique Metropolis look that they're designing for this film. But I'm definitely curious what everyone else thinks about the idea of not having necessarily a straightforward linear time frame, with giving these shows the abilities and these movies the abilities to just do what they want when they want. It's going to be something very interesting. Creature Commandos is about to set off on December 12th, and that's our first official look into the DCU. We already have some information on that, like timeline wise and continuity wise. We know that it's going to be taking place after the events of James Gunn's Suicide Squad film. It's going to have the cause and effect of the loss of Rick Flag, with Rick Flag Sr. addressing it. So we know timeline wise it's coming after that, but we really don't know what they're going to do now timeline wise with Superman. We know that he's not necessarily the first superhero. There's other characters that are introduced in that film, but are they potentially looking at taking this film and setting it before the Suicide Squad? It opens the door for a lot of questions, a lot of things to be excited about, to look forward to. I know I had some heavy criticism with Superman not necessarily being the first superhero. He's getting the first movie, but you have Green Lantern, Hawkgirl, Metamorphose in the film, Mr. Terrific. You have a lot of characters in there that are established characters. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that they were around before Superman, but they're clearly established. They're working together. They have like this whole coordinated group that potentially looks like a Justice League startup. So who knows what they're going to do, but now we know that we're not limited by a linear timeline. Does this sound like a better idea to you than just doing the MCU straightforward thing? I'm definitely on board for this. It sounds like a way better plan. You can always do the next chapter when you want to, or you can do the already announced Amazon's HBO Max show and set it in the way past. We already know it's pre-Diana, so why are any of us surprised at the news that this isn't just a straightforward linear path? But leave me a comment down below. I'm getting more and more excited for this James Gunn DCU era. There's a lot of potential here. So we'll see where it all goes. But be sure to comment, like, subscribe to the video, hit that join button, become a channel member. And until next time, as always, I'm Mark, but we are Legion.